How's it going everybody? This is Yeow here and welcome to my very first Maplestory M guide video. In this video, I will try to share almost everything that I know about Magnus, the third commander boss in this game, for both single and multi mode. I will also share some tips for you if you want to give this boss a shot. By the end of this video, I will share a full solo Magnus gameplay by myself. Let's jump right into it. You need to reach level 170 to gain access to this content, but I recommend you to try it only if you reach level 200 because the boss is so tanky that you need a massive damage boost from V Matrix at this level. There are two modes for Magnus boss battles, single and multi-mode, where each mode has both simulation and hard version. Simulation has no potion cooldown, unlimited death counts, and a 15 minutes battle timer. Whereas hard version has a HP or MP potion cooldown of 5 seconds, death count of 3 for single mode, and team death count of 10 for multi-mode. You only have 10 minutes to battle for the hard version. Magnus Simulation has about 9.7 billion HP in single mode and 72.6 billion HP in multi-mode. The single mode roughly translates to 18 million DPS that is required to clear this within 9 minutes. Their HP is comparable to single mode of Hard Healer and Hard Crimson Queen respectively. Magnus Simulation also has a crit rest of 40%, which basically means that even if your crit rate is at 100%, only 60% of your damage line will be crit damage, without the presence of any crit rest debuff or ignore skills like Paladin or Wild Hunter. The hard version of Magnus has 54 billion HP in single mode and 405 billion HP in multi-mode. That's far more HP than any other bosses we had previously. Hard single mode has more than 2 times the HP in multi-version of normal healer, whereas hard multi-mode has more than 2 times the HP of the tankiest boss in Root Abyss content, Chaos Crimson Queen. On top of that, hard Magnus also has 50% crit rest, which further decreases your portion of crit damage to the boss, making your DPS even lower as compared to what you can do to other bosses. For comparison, all Chaos Root Abyss bosses and Chaos Healer have a crit rest of only 35%. There are two main components in Magnus battle: environmental effects and boss attacks. But before diving into these topics, you should already know about HP scale attacks, fixed damage attacks, and pushback effects. I'll just briefly summarize them on the screen. Feel free to pause the video if you need. There are 3 environmental effects when you are battling against Magnus. First up, there is a blue Magnus zone, which moves along with Magnus throughout the entire battle. And the zone size shrinks every time Magnus HP gets reduced by a quarter. There are 3 penalties if you are standing outside Magnus zone, which includes a HP loss of 15% per second, a massive reduction to both your damage and potion efficiency. You can only deal 1/10 of your original damage when you are attacking him outside the zone, and your potions will only have 10% of the recovery effect. Even one power elixir only heals 10% of your HP and MP instead of 100%. If you clear all Tyrant's Castle quests, you will be granted a Nova's protection buff, which reduces the penalty when standing outside the zone. Your reduced damage and potion efficiency will be increased to 20%, which means that you can now deal 1/5 of your damage to Magnus, and one power elixir recovers 20% outside the zone. So please, finish the quest first before trying Magnus. Secondly, sleeping gas appears on both sides of the battlefield periodically, which can catch players to sleep, in other words, stun for 3 seconds. This effect can be avoided by the status resistance skills like Dark Side or Magician's Protection Shields. But once you get caught by it, you cannot move or use any potions for the next 3 seconds, including power elixirs, and support classes like bishops cannot remove this effect. For your information, this picture shows the full Magnus boss fight map. The boss spawns here, and the sleeping gas roughly cover these areas, so you and your team need to keep Magnus in the center of the map to avoid this threat. The third environmental effect is meteorites, which starts falling from the sky as soon as the battle begins. This is similar to the bombs in the last phase of Chaos Bonbon. There are 3 different sizes of meteorites, and some of them fall at a higher speed than the others. All of them deal AoE fixed damage upon contact, for as low as 31,000 damage to as high as 104,000 damage. You are most likely to be instantly killed if both Meteorite and Magnus hit you at the same time, so it is best to avoid them at all costs. Meteorites tend to fall more frequently as Magnus HP drops. It starts from this to this. So if you already struggle to survive at the beginning, good luck in the last quarter of the battle. Now you have a brief understanding on the environmental effect. Let's get into all 5 Magnus attacks. I will introduce every attack from the Magnus battle before talking about the attack cycle, which varies among all 4 different moves. The very first attack in the boss fight is Kaiserion Windmill, or Spin Attack in short. Magnus spins around him and deals 3 ticks of 25% damage within the spin radius. The first tick gives 1 stack of bleeding effect, and the third tick heavily pushes back whoever gets hit by it. You can dodge Spin Attack by moving sideways or upwards to get away from a spinning radius, which for your information, the radius is slightly shorter than the Magnus zone during the second quarter of the fight. So if you are avoiding Spin Attack sideways, you can stand on the very edge of the zone during the first half, then completely out of the zone during the second half. If you move away slightly too late from a spin radius, you will tick the first but not the third tick of the spin attack. If that's the case, you will bleed but not pushed back by this attack. On the other hand, if you only get hit by the second or third tick of a spin attack, you will get pushed back without bleeding. The next attack is called Blade Attack, or Dash in short. He charges forward for a long distance and deals 70% to all the players within his travel distance. Whoever got hit by Dash will also have 1 stack of bleeding effect and a huge knockback. Dash attack can be avoided if you are standing behind him or jump upwards. However, there is a janky part about this attack. If Magnus performs dash and switches direction at the same time, he will then deal damage on the opposite side. From this clip, you can notice that when he dashed to the left, the player on the left did not get hurt, but the one on the right side took the damage instead. You can make use of this jank to ease your battle in single mode, but more on that later. The bleeding effect from both spin and dash attacks makes you lose 10% HP per second. This effect lasts for 10 seconds and it cannot be cured using all cure potions. However, if you get hit by these attacks again within the effect duration, the effect will be stacked up and you will then lose 20% per second for the next 10 seconds. I'm not sure what is the maximum number of stacks you can get, but please don't stack these effects during the battle, otherwise power elixirs couldn't even save you from that. The next one is Clone Attack, where he summons 1 green color portal above every player, and his clone will strike downwards 3 seconds later to deal a heavy amount of damage. When a green portal appears on you, you need to move away immediately, or you will take a heavy blow of 10 million fixed damage. The best way to tackle Clone Attack when you battle as a team is to crowd together before the casts, so that the hit area of these clones is small enough to have more avoidable spaces. Even if only a few players are standing slightly far away from a crowd, it could cause the entire team to lose the team formation. The fourth and the fanciest attack by Magnus is Dark Wave. He flies up in the air and burns the ground diagonally on both sides. This attack deals a continuous ticks of 1 million fixed damage. During the battle, you can either stay right below him or far away from a dark wave radius to prevent getting killed, which for your information, the radius is slightly wider than the first phase of Magnus Zone. Keep in mind that the dark wave is being casted much faster in hard mode compared to simulation, so you have to be aware of where you should stand beforehand so that you won't get killed due to slow reaction. The final Magnus attack is Down Rush, which is almost the same as Dark Wave, but it strikes downwards instead of in diagonal directions. Players who got stabbed by Down Rush will take 1 million fixed damage, which may not make sense to you because his own clone hits harder than himself. Anyway, you need to stay away from him to avoid this attack, and it is arguably the easiest to dodge during the entire boss fight, because after he ascends into the air, you have a time frame of almost 4 seconds to run away from him before he strikes down. Other than these 5 attacks, he also casts 2 debuffs on players during the battle, Zombify and slow. Zombify effect is only casted in multi-mode as it cannot be cured using all cure potions. The attack cycle from all modes are slightly different from one another, and the basic cycle starts from spin, followed by clone attack, dash, purple wave, down rush, and finally, slow debuff. All 4 different modes have a slightly different variation of this cycle. In single simulation, there's one extra spin attack after purple wave and one more dash attack after slow debuff. In single hard mode, only one extra spin attack is casted after down rush. Whereas for multi-mode, Zombify debuff appears after clone attack, a second spin attack after purple wave, and a second dash after slow debuff. This spin attack appears only at a tiny chance, and the rest of these attack cycles are pretty much fixed throughout the battle, but they can be interrupted if you stop attacking for a long period, mainly due to players casting stun skill to Magnus, or when you keep yourself dead for a little longer during single mode. If you watch the multi-mode Magnus gameplay in Korea server, they often drag the boss to the far left corner of the map and fight all the way till the end. This is one of the easiest way to deal with the boss, since all players are crowded up together with him most of the time, therefore eliminating the threats from purple wave attack and also minimizing the clone area. They only need to move to the right when the left edge area is in danger. They are also inside the Magnus zone most of the time and maximizing their damage output throughout the entire battle. However, the power elixirs consumption rate is super high using this method as they take almost all the blade attacks from Magnus, and if they set it on auto use at 90% HP, the constant bleeding effect will make them consume 1 PE for every 1 to 2 seconds. Even if everyone in your team is skilled enough to avoid all his attacks, it is also difficult to replicate this strategy in global version, because in Korea server, bishops can dispel the sleeping gas effect, which is one of the most annoying threats in Magnus battle. Unless... As you already know that Magnus dashes for a very long distance, it is most likely for him to dash into the sleeping gas areas. So my team drags him to the left part of this uncovered area after clone attack, and makes him face to the right before he dashes, so that he is not dashing too deep to the right sleeping gas area, and vice versa. If he dashes into these areas, everyone must not chase him right away and make sure that he moves back to the middle area. You can stay outside the Magnus zone to lose a little bit of HP, because the fight will be much easier when he's in the middle. But you also need to be careful though, because his next attack after one of the dashes is purple wave. So while everyone is waiting for him to come back, he could just stop halfway and fly up immediately for the purple wave attack. So everyone must keep an eye out and position themselves correctly when Magnus stops moving. If you have members who can stun the boss, try to discuss with your team on which Magnus attack is the most threatening to your team, so that they can stop Magnus from casting that attack. For example, clone attack breaks the team formation easily, especially during the second half of the battle. So you or your team member can choose to stun his clone attack. However, you cannot restun any enemies again within the next 60 seconds, even if the stun is casted by other players. So given that one attack cycle lasted less than 60 seconds, the best your team can do is to stop one of his clone attacks for every 2 attack cycles. There are moments where members are forced to group up in a tight spot, like standing under him during purple wave attack, and then a giant meteorite falls right above them. If you think you can take the meteorite hit without risking your life, try to jump and take it in order to save every other members from it. You can just take all the meteorites if you have some damage immunity shields like Dark Side or Paladin's hyper buff skill. Otherwise, you are still safe to tank as long as you don't have any DOT effects with you, and of course, more HP than the meteorite damage. HP buffs come in handy at this point, so it would be great if you have classes with HP party buffs for your team, like Dark Knight or Aaron. Otherwise, if you really need that extra bit of HP for yourself, you can try to get a HP Link skill and decent Hyper Body skill node for your V Matrix. But most importantly, everyone must learn how to survive Magnus' fight of their own, especially during the last quarter of the battle. If everyone just attacks without paying attention to the surroundings, the battlefield could just turn into graveyard in an instant, and the death count could go from 10 to 0 in less than 30 seconds. So the bare minimum requirement I would suggest is to clear multi-simulation mode without dying, without using PE, and without buff item, or if better, without taking any hits from Magnus. Maybe not that strict. I think I should loosen up the requirement a little bit. There we go, I think this is enough. I think you should achieve this in multi-simulation mode, so that you won't be the burden of the team during the actual fight. The following segment of the video will share some tips and tricks in terms of surviving the fight in general to improve your performance in both single and multi mode. Even if you understand the attack pattern and how to avoid each of them, a proper execution also requires great maneuvering skills and practices. As you can see from each of the attack damages, these 3 attacks are one-hit KO skills, while dash and spin attacks deal at least 70% HP skill damage without protection. But these 2 attacks often force you outside the zone and take the DOT penalty, and most likely to push you into the sleeping gas areas. Or if worse, right into meteorites. Any of these combos is already enough to put you to death. Not to mention that these attacks also have quick casting speed. The moment he lifts up his blade and you are still attacking him, you may still get hit regardless of how quick your reaction is. So you need to try getting away from it ahead of time. Do give yourself some practice on preempting his attack timing, which is what I think the most important thing you should master in this fight. Let's give some examples. After Magnus' clone attack cast, he will perform a dash about 3 seconds later. So after I move away from a clone, I stop attacking him on the 3rd second or after 4 Angel Rays attack for bishops, and then move behind him right away to avoid his dash attack. Another example is that Magnus most likely casts spin attack right after down rush, so I run away from him 1 or 2 seconds after he lands back to the ground. There are a few other complicated examples that I think you need to figure out by self-practice. But once you master the preempting technique, it can save you tons of power elixirs with little or no loss to your overall damage output. Speaking of that, try to avoid registering power elixirs on auto use if possible, especially at 90% HP when fighting against Magnus, unless you are ready to spend hundreds of power elixirs for every single fight. The reason is that your HP constantly drains whenever you bleed from Magnus blade attacks or standing outside the Magnus zone. As I mentioned previously, power elixirs consume every second or 2 from these DOTs. Though auto using them is most likely to keep you alive throughout the fight, but you don't want to just use up 8 of them from a single spin attack, otherwise you can easily consume more than 200 power elixirs within 5 minutes and may still fail the battle. What I can advise is to use the highest level HP or MP potions instead, and register power elixirs on manual use. Although these potions have 5 seconds cooldown on every use, they can still fully recover you if you don't get hit too many times. Power elixirs are often being used only inside the zone to make full use of them. But if you are forced to stay outside the zone at low HP, then only you prepare to use at least 3 before getting back inside. I can't think of any better way yet, but at least this method works the best for me, with proper preempting technique. My personal best Magnus run is consuming 1 power elixir during a 7 minutes fight without any deaths. One of the tricky parts of the attack cycle is clone dash attacks. One way is to leave a gap between the clone above you and Magnus, so that you can have a space to hide behind him if you are avoiding dash attack in this way. You can choose to move away from him during his clone skill animation so that the clone appears at a distance, or lure him far away from a clone after it appears above you. Some of the active skills can also make you invisible when casting, like Luminous Hyper Skill Armageddon and Shade's Hyper Skill Spirit Incarnation. You can cast these attacks at the right timing to avoid dash attack without any fancy maneuvers. However, some of these skills cannot ignore the pushback effects from a spin attack. Take Spirit Incarnation as an example. This skill can totally ignore dash attack, but when Magnus spin attack hits you, your attack will be cancelled immediately from that. So you need to experiment on these interactions with your own class in simulation mode. Remember the jank I talked about earlier, where Magnus dash in one direction and deal damage on the opposite side. You can move slightly across his midpoint just before he dashes, so that he can cast and switch direction at the same time. In this way, you can just navigate yourself through his dashing path without getting hurt, as if you are immune to his attack, and get back into the zone much earlier. Other than preempting technique and manual PE, you also need to foresee the safe spots for the next few seconds when you are avoiding Magnus attacks. So it is also important to pay attention to the upper half of your screen during the fight. As you can see from this gameplay, knowing that his next attack is spin and there is a bunch of meteorites falling on his right side, I will then choose to move to the left side to avoid it. In this next clip, the next Magnus attack is Purple Wave and the giant meteorite is falling right below him. If you know you don't have enough HP to take the meteorite hit, you need to run far away from him immediately. This practice is difficult to pull off perfectly, as it often comes down to split-second decisions. But in general, you have to pay attention to multiple threats at a time during this battle. You don't want to avoid one attack just to get killed by the other one, like the following clips. If you are still not confident enough to survive the fight, you can also try to lure Magnus slightly to the left side and fight there. This allows you to expose a portion of your respawn area, so that if you die during the battle, you can check whether that spot is safe for you to respawn or not. Let's say if you die on the right side, at least you can have a clue on the sleeping gas timing. But you still have to pray for the RNG from a meteorite. Sometimes you wouldn't know that there's a giant meteorite right above the spawning area, so if you're unlucky, you could die again immediately if this happens. Lastly, try not to panic or be nervous during the fight, especially when you are close to finishing him off. Many of the unnecessary deaths were either caused by not paying attention to meteorites, or simply being too excited because they almost cleared it for the first time ever. There are times where some people, including myself, rush back to the Magnus zone immediately after respawn, but get killed by Purple Wave on the way back, or run into multiple meteorites instead. If you can take down half of the HP within 4 minutes, you should be able to secure the victory if you stay calm throughout the fight. If you fail to do so, you may have to either practice harder in the first half or spend more money building on gears. Anyway, that's all I can share for now. If you think I missed out some of the important stuff related to Magnus, feel free to share them in the comment section down below. But in my honest opinion, he is not as tanky as you may have thought, because there are many strong teams who can clear Chaos Crimson Queen within 1 minute, which roughly translates their DPS to about 3 to 4 minute clear for multi-hunt Magnus, including his invisible time frames and higher crit resistance. He's just rather annoying because almost all his attacks are forcing players out of the zone, and too many effects and details to pay attention to, thus having a much higher skill cap as compared to most of the other bosses, where you could just stand still like a totem and attack all the way through, provided you have enough power elixirs stocked up. If you find this video helpful, feel free to like and share it to your friends who want to try it. I strongly believe that there are tons of players who are stronger than me in terms of DPS, which for your information, we're first clear Hard Magnus and only have about 170 million DPS on Chaos Crimson Queen, so I hope this video can motivate you to try and clear it now. With that being said, here's my full solo Magnus gameplay with just using one power elixir. Hope you enjoy.